The Lord's Prayer is not just a recitation, it is a guide to understanding how we should approach God in our prayers. At its heart, this prayer consists of two essential parts. The first, focused on God's purposes and will, and the second, concerning our daily needs. The prayer begins with, "Our Father in the skies." This phrase is simple, yet profound. It calls to mind the expansiveness of God, who created and governs the universe. But notice the use of Father. Jesus does not teach us to address God as some distant force, but as a personal, loving Father. This is the foundation of the prayer, intimacy with the Creator. When we say, "Hallowed be your name," we are acknowledging God's holiness. Holiness is not just purity. It is a recognition of God's uniqueness, His otherness. Throughout history, Israel was called to represent God's holiness, yet they often fell short. The prophets, especially Ezekiel, foresaw a day when God's holiness would be fully realized once more. In praying for God's name to be hallowed, we participate in the restoration of this divine reality. Next, we ask for God's kingdom to come and for His will to be done, on earth as it is in heaven. This is not a passive request, it is a call to action. We are asking to become instruments of God's will, living out His love and compassion in our world. To pray for God's kingdom is to commit ourselves to a way of living that mirrors heaven, a life of peace, justice, and love for our neighbors. Give us today our daily bread. A humble request for sustenance. This echoes the Israelites' journey in the wilderness, where God provided manna each day. But daily bread is not just about food. It's about trusting God to meet our needs, whatever they may be. This prayer reminds us to rely on God for everything, from the most basic provisions to the greater spiritual needs we often overlook. Then, we pray for the forgiveness of our debts, as we also forgive our debtors. Forgiveness is not easy, but Jesus taught that forgiving others is the key to breaking the cycle of revenge and resentment. Forgiveness does not erase the wrong, nor does it mean forgetting, but it releases us from the burden of bitterness. When we forgive, we reflect God's grace and mercy, allowing healing to take root in our hearts. We also ask not to be led into temptation, but to be delivered from evil. Every day we face decisions, choices between trust in God or reliance on our own wisdom. This petition is about seeking guidance, asking God to steer us away from the paths that lead to darkness. It's a recognition of our vulnerability and the need for divine strength to resist the lies and deception of evil forces. Jesus Himself prayed this prayer. On the night before His crucifixion in the Garden of Gethsemane, He prayed with the same humility and surrender that He taught us. Jesus faced the ultimate test, and in that moment, He trusted fully in God's will. His prayer, "Not my will, but yours be done," is the essence of what it means to trust in God. Through His death and resurrection, Jesus demonstrated that God's kingdom had indeed come, and that His victory over evil was complete. The Lord's Prayer is not just a request for personal needs, it is a declaration of hope, an affirmation that God's purposes will ultimately triumph. So how do we pray like Jesus? We do so with simplicity, with trust, and with love. In this prayer, we acknowledge God's holiness, seek His will, depend on His provision, and extend forgiveness as we ourselves are forgiven. This is how we join in His kingdom, here and now. Thank you for reflecting with us today. If you found value in this video, consider liking and subscribing to join our ongoing journey of faith.